Alright, trying a different camera, seeing if this one's going to work. It's been shutting off after a couple minutes, but I thought I'd try it again. Actually got some work done on the outer foot shells. Hopefully this thing's going to focus. I can't look at it while I'm filming, so I'll have to film this and then watch it. These are two pieces. They have magnets in them. The magnets are for the plates that fit on the side. These plates do not currently fit. They bump on the outside edge. I'm thinking that is because I need to grind away material from this inside corner. They fit flush up at the top, but down at the bottom they don't fit into the recesses properly. I glued these pieces together, but I didn't like the strength, so I got out an old soldering iron I don't use anymore, a 45 watt old Radio Shack soldering iron that you can't control the temperature of. And I went down the seam after I glued it and let the glue dry for 24 hours. I went down the seam with soldering iron to kind of melt the two pieces together at the seam. And then I took some extra filament and filled it into the divot that I made when I melted down the seam, and then I spread it across. So it looks terrible because it's an old soldering iron and it was dirty, but this is an area that is not going to be visible. I also did this small piece here because it's just a really small, weak connection point. So I did it on the inside where you can't see it, although I don't think you'll see it on the back either because this part has got the battery box on it and is up against the droid. I also went, and on this side I just kind of went back and forth and melted the plastic over the seam. I didn't add any extra material and I didn't make a big divot, I just kind of went side to side. I didn't do this area here because that's a really thick area and the pieces went together well and it's glued enough that, and especially after I've done the welding, that I can't flex it. It doesn't flex, so this gap does not open, does not widen when I flex it. So I'm not going to bother welding that part because it's obviously held together strong enough. The only issue might be if the seam widens, any filler material that I use before I paint this, it might crack and then the seam might show as a crack. But it is so strong now between the glue that's inside and the back that's been plastic welded together that I don't think that's going to be a problem on this particular foot. What is a problem, however, on both feet, as you can see, it's not a full foot. There's a second piece here that completes the foot. The problem is it's too big. It's probably not going to show on camera, especially since this is the one that's in transparent filament. But if I line one side up, the other side is off a fair amount. That's a fair amount. There's no way that even if I center the pieces that I'm going to be able to sand that much material away and still have it look right. So the question then is, of course, what printed wrong? The footshell parts or this part? The other issue is that there's of course two footshells and two of these. And this piece is too long on both the left and right foot. So I don't know what printed too long and what printed the proper size at this point, or how that even happened. So here I've gone to the trouble of sanding this whole thing and doing the plastic welding, and now I realize that this piece is too big, and what do I need to reprint? The other side, this side here, didn't go together as well. There was a gap, and it did flex even after gluing and plastic welding backside. I could see that this gap between these two pieces, when I flexed it, widened, and that means that that seam, under any load or twisting force, could have cracked the filler material that I'll use to fill the gap, and then once it's painted, it might crack and have the seam showing as a crack. So I put some filler material there. It looks pretty bad, but these are just flat. There's 3 different angles, but they're just flat, flat, flat. 3 different flat angles. So I should be able to sand that down and use filler for any low spots, just like any other part. And it's now super strong. This part also printed with a problem. When I put these two parts together, again, new camera, and I'm not even going to be able to tell until I finish this video if it's even visible. Up at the top here, this piece seems to angle down a bit. So this half is lower than this half. But when you get down to the bottom, it's the opposite. This part looks like it's too far up. But up here at the top, this part is too far down. And it looks like it happens somewhere in here, in this area. Because from here, all through this thick area, this half is too high. But once you get up to the very top, where you've got this ledge, the ledge is now too low, and the overall height is too low. So I'm going to have to do some sanding to get that level. I'm going to have to add some filler probably to here to get that level if I want to get a level. There was also a gap between the two parts. They didn't glue together perfectly flush. Even I trial fitted it and it seemed okay, but then when it came time to actually glue it, they didn't go together well. So I used a lot more filler material because these two parts were not even touching each other. So it was really flexible in this seam right here. So I ended up adding more material, and I'm going to have to sand that down because on the other one where I just kind of did cross hatches with no added material, I might have to lightly sand it to get it flush so that this piece fits on flush. But I'll probably won't even have to do it. It'll probably be fine. But this one I am going to have to do some sanding and get rid of some of that excess plastic that I have filling up that seam. So yeah, bummer there that, again, I concentrated on getting everything printed last year and spent 3 months or whatever it was just non-stop printing and didn't do any fitment or finishing or anything. And now that I'm doing it, I'm finding some issues that I would like to have known about sooner. Again, if we go to the other side, and I put this piece on and make it level with one side, hopefully you can see it is way too big, this lower piece. There's a big gap there that's I don't think I can fix that by sanding and filler. So again, the question is this the right size and I have to reprint both foot shells because they're wrong, or is it just this, which would be the easier thing to reprint, just these two pieces? I did try fitting the wheel assembly in, and there's 2 bolt holes that go into this wheel assembly, and they seem to line up. However, this top I can't get this top flush. So it's almost like this should be a little wider so that this will fit easier onto the top of the drive unit assembly. And then there's a huge gap here between this part where there's no gap here. So yeah, at this point again, I don't know what to do. I don't think there's supposed to be a gap in there, but see if you can see on this foot, this is the hardest piece for me to print of this entire project. This one part of the foot shell, it's printed in PETG, which for me always warps. If it takes more than an hour and a half, 2 hours to print something, PETG is always warping on me. And this part has an overhang. You print it upside down, and it's got this overhang. I was doing it with supports, and I wasted a whole bunch of material because it just kept failing and failing and failing, and finally I printed it without support, so it looks rough and nasty, but it actually did print properly. But now it's showing me that it's a huge gap between that and the plastic foot shell. So I really don't know what to do at this point. So it's looking like my foot shells might be bad. This part of the foot shell on the other side might be bad, and my drive assembly part might be bad. So yeah, that's where I am right now today after spending the time to glue these foot shells together. Really happy that this one turned out really nice, and now it's showing me that something's wrong. Things aren't lining up. Something did not print the right size. This is the second time I've had this issue. The first was printing the skirt. One of my first videos, the skirt goes on the bottom of R2's body, is 4 pieces, and they weren't lining up right, and it turned out that I figured the one piece that looked like it was too short in 2 directions. I reprinted it, resliced it, reprinted it, and it fit perfect. So I was hoping that was just a one-off, but now I don't know. Again, these 2 pieces, just holding them like this, the left and the right sides, are the same width. So they printed the same width, and these 2 foot shells are the same width because these are too long on both of them. So it's either these 2 pieces printed too long, or 4 foot shells printed too short because these are left right. Well, I guess it could be not just 4, it could be 2 of them. It could just be one that printed too short. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm going to do right now. And again, this cover seems to fit okay at the top, but not at the bottom. So is that telling me that the foot shell's printed wrong? That this piece should just drop in there, but it doesn't? It's too short at the bottom? I'm not sure. I mean, I guess maybe I could measure the foot shells from one point to another, and then figure out in a 3D program how to measure that, see if what I have matches the 3D printing program. But of course, now that I've welded them together, there's no way those are coming apart without destroying them both. So even if just, say, the back half of both of these shells printed too short, I'm going to have to print the whole foot shells all over again for both of them. Really not pleased with that right now, and not sure what I'm going to do. as I said, these don't seem to get flush. I have to push them really, really hard, but then the holes do align. But then there's this gap, which is another issue. That's not the foot shell, that's the problem with these drive units, which in PETG, like I said, I have an extremely hard time printing in PETG. I think my warping issue might be because my bed is too hot. I use helper discs. The helper discs pull up, and the corners of the prints pull up. So I don't know what it is other than the pieces being too hot by the bed, and so as it prints after a couple hours, the corners are lifting up because the bed is so hot that the material's maintaining the heat that it's causing it to come up. So lowering the bed temperature while printing, and just trying to do it that way, I might be able to reprint these pieces, but I have to buy more filament because I don't have any more PETG. I've just figured, you know, I'm done with it. I got these drive units together and working, and everything seemed fine. But with this gap that I believe is going to show, this is where the hoses for R2's feet go. So this is going to be, if you're looking at the front of R2, this is going to be the foot that's on the right hand side of R2. The ankle goes in here, so this open hole is going to be an open hole. I mean, there's no other piece that covers that up. Whereas this one goes right to the edge. So unless I can maybe print a wedge and just chuck it in there and glue it in there, I don't know what I'm going to do. So yeah, I'm kind of stuck right now with a bunch of pieces that don't seem to be going together. And that's I guess that's it for today. I work the rest of the weekend. And I don't know that I'm going to have time to work on this anymore, but that'll give me some time to maybe think about it and try and figure out if there's anything I can do to figure out what printed wrong. What I'd like to do is just reprint these. They print with this part on the bed, so they print like that. So I could just reprint for, you know, an hour or two, so it gets just enough of a layer that I can pull it off the bed and hold it up to the foot shell and see if the length is correct, and if it is, then start over and do it again. So maybe, I mean, first I'd slice it again, because I never determined that one piece that was too short in two dimensions, if it was the slicer or if it was the printer that had the problem. So all I did was reslice it and reprint it, and it worked. So I sliced these two pieces at the same time, and I printed one after the other, even though they're in different materials. This was the majority of the transparent filament that I had left, and this one I believe is eSun PLA Plus. It looks the same bright shade of white as this, so I think, pretty sure that's what I used for this one. So it wasn't the filament that made a difference. It's either the slicing or the printer, and I'm thinking maybe the slicing. I've been using the Prusa slicer with a profile I found online for the TiVo Tornado to print these. They print diagonally on the bed, so maybe something was going on with that version of the Prusa slicer software. So the easiest thing I guess I could do is try reslicing, and like I said, print for a couple hours just so I get this base piece, so I can pull it off the bed, hold it up to the foot shell, and see if it's also too wide, and that would at least tell me if the problem is with these, which would be the easiest thing to fix, which still doesn't help me much that these foot shells aren't going quite down far enough. This one actually goes further than the other one. I do have a little extra material here because of the welding, so that might be rubbing a bit, but I'm just not sure where it's, I can't quite tell where it's catching, why it isn't going all the way flat down. There's also these bolt holes that go into that drive unit. They're pressing up against it, and there's also these bumps for the magnet, and this one I used extra epoxy because this one is, you can see it's a, in one of my other videos I show this, it's a nice like pyramid, round pyramid type shape, and this one has got gaps in it, 3 gaps in the printing that epoxy oozes out of, so maybe it's just this extra epoxy around this magnet hole. Maybe I can just shave that, and that's rubbing against the foot shell. There's probably not enough light to see it, but that top magnet that has that issue is pressing, looks like it's pressing against the drive unit, so maybe that's it. But at this point, yeah, I'm kind of at a loss as to what's going on. Yeah, this one just doesn't want to go in there. I think it might be bumping against some of the bolt heads. But, okay, there we go. Yeah, it's about the same, but you can also see that same gap right there. I'm pretty sure there's not supposed to be a gap right there. And I'm going to put that down again to that one piece that's got an angle. That's the hardest piece in this whole project for me to print because I have trouble with PETG, and it's recommended these are, all the parts for the drive units are printed in PETG because they've got, the motor goes in there and the weight of the whole droid is on this, on the ground obviously, and so they want these to be as strong as possible. But if I can't get that thing to print in PETG, I might have to just remake that piece in PLA+. Yeah. So at this point, I'm kind of at a loss, and I'll have to look into it some more. So, bunch of progress done. But unfortunately, turns out that there's a problem somewhere in there, so I will make an updated video when I figure something out.